The idea of flipping the classroom has been in the educational air for about 10 years now, and many people have done flipped classrooms with great success, and some of us who really want to run flipped classrooms may not know where to start. So today we have on our show Jon Bergmann, who was a former K-12 educator and currently is a leading authority on flipped classroom. He's published books on it. He helps lead training sessions on it and things like that. He's going to talk about what the flipped classroom is, why it's important, and most importantly, if people want to flip their classrooms, how to start in that process and what to pay attention to. So long and short, for those of you who don't know what flipped classrooms are, we're talking about flipping what we do inside of classrooms and outside of classrooms. Traditionally, we do the content delivery in class, and most class time is focused on that. And outside of class, we're focused on giving students exercises and homework that helps them make use of that direct instruction. Flipped classrooms are different. They actually do the content delivery at home so that we free up class time to actually, after we've learned the content, do the exercises in the classroom. And several people argue that there are advantages to this approach. The first is that if we do direct instruction in class, students often don't realize they have misunderstandings or they need help until they get home and do exercises. But that's when they're alone. So this frees up class time to do exercises when you have peers and when you have teachers to help you. The second thing is using class time for direct instruction and content delivery doesn't seem to make sense in a day where technology allows us to record things like video recorded lectures or audio excerpts that we can give students so they can go home, look at those things there, and then come into class and do the activity here. So let me introduce Jon Bergmann and we'll get to the interview. Jon Bergmann is one of the leading authorities on the flipped classroom and is currently coordinating or guiding flipped learning initiatives around the globe. He's the author of 8 books, including the bestseller Flip Your Classroom, which has been translated into 15 languages, and his most recent is Solving the Homework Problem by Flipping the Learning. Before this, he spent 24 years as a middle and high school science teacher. In 2002, Jon received the Presidential Award for Excellence for Math and Science Teaching, and in 2010, he was named semifinalist for Colorado Teacher of the Year. So if the flipped classroom model is something that appeals to you or you want to find out more about it, this video should be really interesting because we talk again about what it is, what the evidence says for it, and also for those interested, what types of things should you be looking for. I've already flipped my classrooms, and I can say that during this interview, I learned things about best practices for flipping classrooms that I didn't know before. So I hope everyone finds this video valuable and gets you thinking. All right, so we are here today with Jon Bergmann. We're going to talk about flipping the classroom. So, Jon, I assume that most of our viewers are already roughly familiar with what flipping the classroom is. I'll put some video resources below this video. But just for context, why don't we just review the idea? What is it? Why is this an important thing for teachers to be considering and talking about?
Actually, I would argue that a lot of people think they know what flipped learning is, but don't really know what flipped learning is. I think what people think it is they think it's that thing with the video, where people watch a video ahead of time and they come to class. So that is sort of true. It's really an incomplete view of flipped learning. What I would argue about flipped learning is when you move the direct instruction, if you will, that's the lecture, from the group space, where you teach, classroom space, to the individual space. Now, the individual space is when the student is alone. That alone often happens at home, but it can also happen inside the class, a la what we call the in-flip model. So it's a flipping of the group space and the individual space. So it's when you move the direct instruction from the group space to the individual space. But then here's the magic: it's within the group space is transformed into a place of application, analysis, and creation.
So when I learned about the flipped classroom, one of the things that struck me in terms of why it's important is also that it just it makes a lot of sense with today's world, where it's very difficult to have students work at home without guidance and then bring the stuff into class that doesn't require as much guidance. I'm sure there's evidence showing that it's much more effective to have students in class doing things that require the guidance rather and do the other stuff potentially outside of the classroom.
Actually, in one way, I think what you've just got at really explains what flipped learning is. I think the best way to picture this, and I think the 3 most powerful images in flipped learning, is to think of Bloom's taxonomy. I know a lot of the listeners are pre-service teachers, and so you may be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. Typically pictured as a pyramid: knowledge at the bottom of the pyramid, understanding, application, analysis, evaluation, and creation, in that order. And it gets smaller as you go up. But in flipped learning, what you essentially are doing is you're flipping Bloom's taxonomy upside down, where you spend less class time on knowledge and understanding and more class time on application, analysis, evaluation, creation. And as I was thinking more deeply about this, actually, and in writing a new book, I've actually redrawn even the flipped Bloom's taxonomy and now pictured it as a diamond shape. Again, knowledge, understanding, and the middle of Bloom's is application and analysis. At the top is evaluation, creation. So the bulk of the area of the diamond is at the application and analysis level. And in flipped learning, I think the practical thing that you can actually do in most classrooms, this K-12 classrooms, you could argue like graduate level classes is a different story, but the bulk of class time should be spent at the application and the analysis level. And also when studying or doing research for this book, I came across some research of Dr. Robert Marzano, who is a well-known researcher in the educational world. And he studied 2 million classrooms and said 58% of class time, US, 2 million classrooms, is lecture. 2 million.
Yeah.
So the reality is we're not, we can say, hey, we're doing high order probability-based learning. It's not happening, folks. We're lecturing. That's what we're doing today. I think it's 2014 to 2016, something like that. It's not happening. So if that's the case, flipping the classroom just makes sense.
Good. So the next question that I have is, I'm sure you've seen a lot of different flipped classrooms, and obviously different ones will look different. Different people will do it differently. So maybe for some illustration, can you give us an idea of maybe 1 or 2 classrooms that you've seen that you were particularly impressed with in terms of using a flip approach?
Yeah, I've had a crazy privilege over the past few years to visit flipped classrooms literally all over the globe, from China to Iceland to the UK, and I've walked into some amazing classrooms. And by the way, I've also walked into ones who aren't so amazing. But one thing that's true about all of them, okay, at least they're done really well, is they're active places of learning. The teacher is not standing in front of the room. She is moving about the room, helping individuals, helping groups, guiding the practice. The rooms tend to be a little bit more noisy, a little bit more chaotic, they see up here, but it's an active and engaging place of learning. You know, one real cool story, I was in a school actually not far from where I'm sitting right now here in the Chicago suburbs, and I walked into Kirk Humphrey's class. Kirk Humphrey's a 7th grade math teacher, and he had the kids watch a video the night before, typical flipped kind of a deal, right? And he starts the class out this way. It's just the most amazing. He says, all right, who wants to summarize the video? Some young guy, he stands up and he grabs a marker and he sends the whiteboard and he starts talking about the math lesson. And then he pauses and another kid raises his hand and he throws the marker to kid number 2. And this young lady stands up and she starts expounding. And then one kid raises his hand and says, I don't understand, whatever, something. And they all turn to Mr. Humphreys, who's, by the way, in the back of the room. And he pauses. They're all looking for him for the answer. He pauses. He says, well, what do you guys think? And somebody raises their hand and responds perfectly to the question. You see, in most flipped classrooms, by the way, I did this when I founded the whole flipped learning thing in 2007. I had the kids ask me questions, and I was the expert. I answered them. But what Kirk had done is he even flipped the old, review of the video portion of the first few minutes of the class on its head, and the kids were doing the summary. Now, I was watching his classroom in the spring of the year, so they'd been trained. It took some time to get to this point, but it was magic, absolute magic.
So hopefully by now we have convinced some of our listeners to think and really strongly entertain a flipped model if they haven't already. And so now maybe we should talk about some of the practical stuff. So you're at the point where you want to flip your classroom. I can attest that it's quite a big undertaking. It feels really large because it is a large project. Mm-hmm. So let's think about what are the things that teachers who want to do this should be considering and thinking about, I guess, in order to start the process. So let's start with the stuff that's going to be that used to be in class that's now going to be out of class. So we're talking about it used to be lecture delivery, that was the knowledge transmission. Well, I guess we want to figure out a way that we don't have to spend as much time or any time on that in class, and we want to do that out of class. So what are some of the ways that teachers can be shifting that from in class to out of class?
Yeah, the vast majority of people are making flipped videos. So they're taking the content, they're an expert at English or science or history or nursing or whatever it might be, and they are creating a short micro video. It's important, a short micro video on a particular topic.
So when you say micro video, let's just pause for a second. You said that's an important thing to keep in mind. Why micro video rather than just video?
It has to be short. I mean, how many of you will click on a YouTube video that's longer than 5 minutes? I mean, really, so that's part of it, and it's important to chunk things, and that's actually, you look at research on education, and chunking is a very important thing, and frankly, teachers have not done a very good job over that over the years, and so flipped actually mirrors some really good research that people haven't really thought about. So take one topic, put it on a video. So let's say you want to teach students how to write a good thesis statement. You're an English teacher. You can make that into a 5 or a 6 minute video. Boom. What are you going to do in class? How about practice writing thesis statements? Remember how that was done in a traditional class? You taught them how to write a thesis statement. By the way, it didn't take you 5 minutes, it took you 20. And then you sent them home to write thesis statements. And what happened? They went home and they tried, but they got stuck, and they brought back, to school stuff that was just okay. Maybe some kids brought awesome stuff, but a lot of kids didn't. The other problem is, of course, when they're stuck, the only resource many of them have is their parents. Now, if you live in a place where, the zip code says that your families make lots of money and they can afford a tutor, or the parents are always there to help you, awesome. That's awesome. Okay, I grew up in one of those homes. I'm privileged. My mom was a teacher. My dad was in the Air Force. I grew up in kind of a, educationally privileged home. A lot of kids don't get to do that. But if you flip it on its head, when the student's stuck, who's there? You, the teacher. You are the expert. And I argue can help them better than their parents, because you are an expert at writing thesis statements, right? Their parents are going to have to pull it from their archives and go, all right, thesis statement, what was that? They're going to go, I don't remember. They can figure it out, okay. But the best teacher is the teacher.
Yeah, what is your opinion, if you have any, about using video that already exists? Because I've always been impressed by how much in the age of Khan Academy and the age of people bringing stuff up onto YouTube, if you type in any particular subject, you can usually find video. And of course, the teacher can do quality control. We can figure out, okay, which of these videos really does what they want to do. But I always tell teachers that you don't necessarily have to create them anymore. There are often videos that are really well done that other people have created. So what is your opinion or advice on that?
Well, I won't give you advice. I'll give you research. The research says you should make your own.
Okay.
Let me give you the reason why. Good teaching, as you know, has always been not about content delivery, but about relationships. All right, it's still about content. I'm probably overstating that, but relationships and connections with people, human to human, matter. Now, I'm not saying it's bad to use other people's videos, but it is much better. There's one research study that says this, that the teacher created video, because of the relational aspect, makes all the difference in the world. And anecdotally, I've literally trained thousands and thousands of teachers in flipped learning across the world, and I have never heard a teacher who created their own videos say that was a bad idea. Now, is it extra work? Absolutely, no question. This is a huge undertaking, but good story. I got a teacher from Alabama, 8th grade middle school teacher, and he'd been flipping his class for 2 years using Khan Academy videos. He came to one of my workshops, conference actually, and he came up and said, John, I've been flipping my class 2 years, sort of kind of going okay. And I said, tell me what you're doing. He said, Khan Academy. I said, Adam, you need to change your videos. You need to make your own. He said, I don't really want to. I said, why not? Too much work. I said, Adam, if you really want to take it to the next level, you need to make your own videos. He fought me. 6 months later, he shows up at a completely different conference in Atlanta. He says, I've got to talk to you. And he said, it has just absolutely changed everything. It's because of the relational aspect. And he teaches the lowest level kids in his school, the kids who don't play math well. He teaches that group. And he says, it's absolutely changed everything. And he says, it seems kind of odd that I'm teaching a lesson. And really, frankly, it's the same lesson that Sal Khan had done on his video, but it was me.
And I mean, another thing I tell teachers who are convinced it's going to be a lot of work is that it will be a lot of work on the front end, but often, you can really reuse a lot of the videos from semester to semester, from year to year, especially if you're not so specific in the video that you refer to the specific year or whatnot. So you can reuse a lot of that stuff too. Now, the part that goes overlooked, I often find, is people figure out ways to take the content that they would deliver in class and kind of offload that to beyond class. But then you're left with a chunk of time in class. Instead of taking up with lecture, you now have 45 minutes to an hour 15, depending on what level you teach. And now we have to figure out what to do with that time. And it's often, it goes overlooked how difficult it is to figure out, okay, now what am I going to do with this entire class period? So what are some things that you've seen done? I mean, obviously the typical would be to have them do problems with you or in front of you, have them write thesis statements. What other kinds of things would you recommend that teachers can use to really fill that time?
Well, that's a great question, and that's the biggest question in many ways. It's frankly easy to make a instructional video about a subject. The bigger question is, what do you do with the class time? That is the absolute biggest question. And there's a lot of answers. And then to that end, we talked about the 8 books at the beginning that I wrote. 5 of them are flipping math, science, English, social studies, and elementary. They're specific subjects because how it looks, particularly the group space time, which we're referring to, the group space, the class time space, looks different in a math class than it does in a history class. And so in those books, we address particularly the group space. Social study classes, more projects, project-based learning. I mean, we're doing project-based learning in all subjects, but I specifically, for example, saw lots of really cool PBL in the social studies. The way I wrote those books is I interviewed like 30 different just sort of top-level flip teachers in the social studies realm, and then I did the same thing in math and English and social science, etc., so that I could get a view of what that looks like. Another recommendation is that flipped learning continues to evolve. I still think there's this static view of what flipped learning is. And what we're finding as we're doing research is it's continuing to evolve. In fact, it's evolving 3 things. Number one, it's evolving because of new research that keeps coming out every day. I got research just yesterday from Ireland, in flipping via email. It's also evolving because of innovative classroom practices and also evolving because of technology. All these things continue to change, and people who think they understand it don't. And that's one of the reasons that I launched the Flip Learning Global Initiative, so that we could, I brought together the best researchers and the best master teachers in the world, and these folks are helping to lead flipped learning so that people can, again, there's these people who think, I know what it is, and maybe they've even flipped their class, but they have not kept up with the new research, the new innovations. And so the goal of our organization is to keep up with that. So if people stay connected with us, they can stay connected with what's going on. I mean, some of the technologies that I'm seeing are like, oh my word, that's just, I've never thought of that. It's just because more amazing people across the globe are thinking of brand new ways to do stuff that really engage kids.
I know when I was first flipping my classrooms, what I found is after I was able to kind of do it well enough, what I found is what happened in class was I was having fun with students, because no one has fun delivering and listening to lectures. So what you do is you think of all those things that you could do with students where they're actually learning the stuff in the classroom interactively with you, and you end up just having a way better time of it because you see the learning happening in front of you rather than learning happening at home.
And I think it makes it more visible too. One thing I discovered, 10 years ago when we started doing this is that I don't think I really knew what my kids didn't know. I mean, I taught for 19 years in the traditional way, and since I spent so much time honing the craft of delivering content, and I think I was pretty good at it, but when I was amongst my students so much more, I began to really see what they were really struggling with, which they were probably struggling with those first 19 years, but I wasn't as aware of it because I wasn't spending the time with students walking alongside them. And it was so eye-opening and humbling and scary for the kids from the first 19 years in retrospect. So
one question that I had for you that I was concerned with when I was starting to flip my classrooms, and I've heard other people concerned with, is one of the few benefits of doing lecture, let's say in class, is that you have the students in front of you. You know that they're at least theoretically getting it. So if you offload things to the home, the concern will often be if they need to have watched this particular video or done this particular reading outside of class, how can I structure a classroom in a way where I can make sure that they are actually doing that at home and coming in prepared?
Well, when we first did this, 10 years ago, the reality is there was no like electronic way to check. So what we simply did is we checked their notes that they had taken some notes on it the day after they'd watched the video, and we just checked them every day. Now, of course, there's some really great technological tools that will, as they log in, if you will, to the video, then it's tracking how many minutes they're spending there, and you can even insert questions inside the video or at the end of the video, whatever you want, and that gives a formative feedback loop for you, so you really can monitor who is and who isn't doing the work. And then if kids don't, then what do you do? Then of course you simply call them out, so to speak, in some way, and have them watch them that day in the class. And then of course they're in a traditional room where they're going to get the content in class, and they're going to have to take the hard stuff home. Our kids quickly realized that was actually easier to watch the video because they don't have the Mr. Bergmann at home anymore, but they could have Mr. Bergmann in the class, so it just made sense. It didn't solve the problem for every single kid, but the vast majority. And again, like I've said, thousands and thousands, I would say hundreds of thousands of teachers who are flipping their classrooms across the world. This issue is not that big of an issue. The issue of the kids not doing the work basically says that they're actually doing it. By and large, there's exceptions, of course. There always will be. But the percentage of kids doing flipped work is actually higher. That's homework issue, really.
Another question that I have is, since flipping the classroom, if you want to flip your entire classroom, is a fairly large undertaking with doing the video, figuring out what you're going to do in class. What do you think about people flipping areas and elements of their classroom, people flipping units but not the whole class? Is this something we should be doing kind of all or nothing, or can people do this kind of gradually and bit by bit?
I have a mixed answer on that. Clearly, the entry level for a flipped classroom is not to flip a class, but to flip a lesson. So you can certainly do this in bite-sized chunks, but there's also some research just on how people learn, right? And just how the brain works that talks about repetition, and habits are formed after you've done about 40 of the same thing over and over again. And most likely, if you're a seasoned teacher, you've taught more than 40 times in a traditional fashion. So the question is if you want to become really, a flipped expert, you've got to probably, I don't know, I hope it's not 40, it might be 40, its research says this, then you do want to do it more often. And I really think flipped, this is kind of changed the subject a little bit, but flipped needs to be the new operating system of education. So one of our research fellows, Dr. Robert Talbert from Eastern Michigan University, he made this point. I just love the way he says this. He says, we need to think of flipped learning as the operating system. So like a computer has an operating system. It's got like Windows or Macintosh, or if it's a mobile device like iOS or Android or something like that. So those are the operating system. And on top of that, we have apps. We have a word processing app like Microsoft Word maybe, or a Google Sheets for Excel, or for a Word, a spreadsheet type of deal. Those are the apps. And flipped learning needs to be the operating system of the new world. And then the apps, project-based learning, inquiry, all those things, those are the things that go on top of that, because flipped gives the educational system time and space to still do the things that are the apps, but we need a basis. And so we need to change the entire, I really believe this, the entire educational system. In fact, this is the most important part of the Flipped Learning 3.0, this banner behind me, is that it's the new operating system for the world of education. If we are looking for a way that personalizes and individualizes the learning and creates a simple, pragmatic way to redo the educational system of the world, flipped learning is that new operating system. It's that new foundation that we need.
I guess my final question for you then is, for those who are watching this video and inspired to flip their own classrooms, which I hope they are, any single one or two pieces of advice for people who are starting that process?
Now, it's important, flipped learning is an easy model to get wrong. Actually, that was in one of the research studies. It said that, and that's right. So it's important that you get trained to do it well. We talked about making your own videos. There's like the 12 cardinal sins of flipping, and in the time we have left, we won't time to go through all those. But I would encourage people to get well trained. One thing that we've done at FL Global is that we've created a certification program, a 10-hour online course where people can learn best practices, research-based practices, pragmatic and practical ways to flip your classroom well. And that's been very powerful. The certification that right now is both in English and in Spanish, not just Spanish subtitles, but done completely in Spanish, so that people can truly learn how to flip their classroom and flip it well. So, I mean, there's a lot of the little steps that people can miss and mistakes that people make. In fact, the ineptness that got me started with, and the organization was starting the certification program, was actually a conversation at a conference last summer. I was having a conversation with a gal. I just sat down and she said, "Hey, I've been flipping my class for a year and it's not going so well." I said, "Okay, good, great. Tell me what how'd you learn about flips?" And she says, I read this cool blog post." I said, "Okay, great." And there was no and. She read one blog post and figured she'd figure out how to flip her class. So it's important that people get well trained. The beauty is flipped is a easy model to understand, but there's lots of nuances that are important to understand so that you don't commit educational malpractice.
Right. This has been a very informative and interesting talk, and I hope that everyone who's watching is inspired. Like we said, you have 8 books out. Your most recent one is, what's the title of it again?
It's called Solving the Problem of Homework by Flipping the Learning. Beautiful,
beautiful. So 8 books out. Highly recommend that people look at these, do what you're saying, and kind of get trained in this method. And Jon Bergmann, thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Have a wonderful day.